All right, let's say our blessing together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. So, with that, last time that we did Pirkei Avot, we did the first Mishnah from Ben Zoma, who said, who is wise? One who earns from everyone. Who is mighty? One who subdues their evil inclination. Who is rich? One who rejoices in their portion. And who is honored? One who honors their fellow human beings. So, today we're going to take on the saying of his friend Ben Azai. Steve, would you read this, please?
Ben Azai said, "Be quick in performing a minor commandment, as in the case of a major one, and flee from transgression. For one commandment leads to another commandment, and one transgression leads to another transgression. For the reward for performing a commandment is another commandment, and the reward for committing a transgression is a transgression."
Okay. And a biography, please.
Biography. This saying was said by Shimon ben Azzi, but he usually was called Ben Azzi. He was active around the same time as Ben Zoma, 11 to 135 CE. One of Ben Azzi's teachers was Rabbi Joshua ben Hanukkah, and Ben Azzi would sometimes quote this teacher to disagree with Rabbi Akiva. For example, Ta'anit for Ben Azzi also studied with Rabbi Tarfon. All this notwithstanding, Ben Azzi was a dedicated student of Rabbi Akiva. Ben Azzi was considered such a diligent student that when he died, it was said that the last of the truly diligent has passed away. Sota 49a. Perhaps it was this trait which explains why Rabbi Akiva's daughter betrothed herself to Ben Azzi and then sent him off to study, just like her mother Rachel did to Rabbi Akiva. On the other hand, he seems to have been so enamored of study that he broke off his engagement. The 4b2. There is a story that Ben Azzi and three other rabbis entered Padres. Ben Azzi died. Ben Zoma lost his mind. Elisha ben Abuya became an apostate, and Ben Akiva was fine. Gershom Shalom, a 20th century scholar of Jewish mysticism, interprets Padres to be Gnosticism, which was a type of Greek philosophy. If somebody saw Ben Azzi in a dream, it was considered an omen of piety. Baruch 757b. How are these sayings relevant to our lives today? Thank
you, Steve. That was a lot of tough names in there. I appreciate that you went at it. All right. So let's see what Ben Azai said. All right. How is this relevant to our lives today?
Your decisions snowball. Make a small one, builds off on each other, and just perpetually increases, good or bad.
Are we to assume the minor mitzvahs are easier to perform than the major ones?
Not necessarily. I think you can assume that one would think they might have a smaller reward.
How do you define a minor one?
That's a fair question. I'll start with the opposite. A major one would probably be something in the 10 Commandments. A minor one might be a smaller detail, typo.
In addition to the 10 sayings, aren't there, I think it's 3, but it might be 2. I can't remember the third mitzvot, which say that if you do them, there'll be a reward in the world to come. And that's honoring thy parents, kibud av v'em, taking the mother, not taking the egg when the mother bird it can see. And I'm trying to remember if it's the third one. So those 3, and to me, honoring parents then becomes even a higher status because it says reward in the world to come, and it's in the 10 saying, it's in the Decalogue. So I'm just saying, to me, those would be considered major too, because there's this extra, not that we know what the world to come looks like, but there's this extra doing it.
Thank you. Yes. I will see if I can further research what it is where you are, which commandments you are promised a long life. Yes, those would also be probably good candidates for major mitzvot.
The idea of a transgression being rewarded seems anathema to me. It's just, is that it's not a good choice of words, I don't think. I don't think. If you commit a transgression, you're not rewarded with another transgression. Hopefully you're rewarded with some kind of
Well, it's
accountability.
easier. I think they're saying it's easier to fall. It's easier if you do one thing that's might be considered transgression, then you're falling into an attitude, or that's acceptable that may lead you to do something else. Not that it's a reward. It's just that you fall into a certain pattern of behavior. You jump a stop sign quickly. You did it once and nothing happened. Maybe you do it another time, or something else that you go to another extreme and you do a little something that's a bit more, shall I say, distant from what would be something being better. So that's how I interpret it.
Just seems an interesting choice of words.
Hmm.
Well, Carol, with your choice of words, I mean, I think that, it's, just part of the poetry with, saying that, like, if you perform a commandment, you do get a reward. And so, like, the transgression is, if you're doing that, I mean, you're gonna get a reward regardless of what you do. And if your reward is gonna be good or bad, depends on what you did. If what you were good or bad. So I think it's saying that everything leads to something else. You're gonna get a reward
I
regardless.
understand that part. I just I don't see committing a transgression being rewarded. Rewarded to me means something positive. And if you commit a transgression, I don't see where you should be rewarded for that. You may wind up being given the same act over again, or be led to the same kind of another transgression, but I don't see it as being a reward. I just see it as an action getting a reaction.
What was the Hebrew that was used in it?
Yeah,
Shesachar mitzvah mitzvah, usachar avera avera. So it's the same Hebrew word in both cases. Which
The Schottenstein translation says, for one mitzvah brings in its wake another mitzvah, and one sin brings in its wake another sin.
okay, that makes
They're not using reward. The reward may be the interpreter's version, if you will. translators, I should say.
Mm.
Okay.
I think a better word than reward would be benefit. Because if you steal, you get a lot of money and you buy things. So that's a benefit.
Hmm.
Barry?
I'm thinking a better word might be recompense or something like that. It's that which comes back to you. When you do good, you get a positive recompense, and it leads to better and then better and better. When you do bad or ill-advised or unwise, it recompenses with more of that. And I think of, for myself, I think of quicksand. The more I get back negative from when I do something negative, I might sometimes struggle to try to combat it, and all of a sudden it becomes quicksand. So I think the sage is wise to say what he says. Good begets good, bad or not good begets not good. Sorry, I didn't have enough time to type that, David. Sorry.
All right. How else is this relevant to our lives today?
I'm not even happy with thinking about reward as reward, that you have to be motivated. You're giving if you do something, if you do a good thing, you're going to be given an additional candy bar, or you're going to go you're rewarded in the afterlife. I mean, it's almost if you're being coerced to do something rather than you feel it's intrinsically a good thing to do.
David, I have a different translation in my book.
Yeah.
It says, Ben Azai said, hasten to do even a slight precept and flee from transgression, for precept leads to precept and transgression leads to transgression. For the recompense of a precept is a precept, and the recompense of a transgression is a transgression.
Interesting. So how does that change the relevance?
Well, so if I'm looking here, the definition for a precept is a general rule intended to regulate behavior or thought. So basically, you're saying that if you follow the rule that regulates your behavior, you will most likely, do something within the same line of thought. Whereas if you transgress, it's kind of like lying about something, and then you have to lie in order to keep that lie going, or to protect it. So I would think that it's like once you do something that's that would be something you shouldn't do, you're more than likely to do that again.
Like a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, Ponzi scheme, or people who end up kind of making the same mistakes again and in their life, and they end up just making wrong judgments.
Could we focus for a moment on the other side of this? That is, here we've been talking about the recompense or the reward or the wages for the sachar for the transgression, the averah. But we have the other side that the rabbis have, that the reward, wages for performing the mitzvah, following the commandment, following the precept, whatever you like, is another one. And I've always found that very, very striking. To me, it's as if they're saying, please correct me if you think this is just mistaken, that we know that doing what you're supposed to do, or doing good deeds, doesn't guarantee in this life anyhow that you're going to be rich and happy and beloved. That doesn't come with the package. And people who try to phrase everything so that it works out that way, you can believe them or not. But the idea that if you perform a mitzvah, you get to do another one, really says this is what we're engaged in. And you go from mitzvah to mitzvah. Don't expect it to put money in your pocket or get rid of your skin rash. Anyway, that's the way I see it.
Good.
Yeah, and I agree with Phil in that similar way. And I disagree. He said you're getting chocolate after doing a commandment. For me, doing a commandment is its own reward. And that should be enough. I don't do it in order to get anything. But what happens is, if you're in the habit or it's your way to do a commandment, you will also do another one. And that will also be self-rewarding. So I see the idea of reward as not something given to you, but something internal that you feel in doing the commandment, which leads you to do another commandment.
I have an analogy maybe from popular culture isn't the right word, but I think that's something that's widely accepted, which is the idea that you are what you eat. So if you fill yourself with better things, in theory, that's better for your health. When you don't fill yourself with better things, sometimes you crave the wrong thing. You know, when you eat better, you supposedly start craving. If you eat less sugar, you crave more natural things. Anyway, to me, it's the same idea that if you fill yourself with good deeds, it's like eating better.
I'm curious about this phrase, flee from transgression. How is that relevant to our lives today?
Where is that, David?
The phrase flee from transgression.
Oh, I see it. Thank you. Sorry.
Line 2. How is that relevant to our lives today?
Well, we should try to avoid doing bad things.
I think it's there plus more that you should stay away from temptation. Don't think you're strong enough that you're going to resist it. Just stay away from tempting situations.
I think that the verbiage, at least in this, is more than just stay away from it, but actively flee. It's not don't do transgressions. It is actively go away from that, from transgressions.
Yeah, it does. It does seem to say that run away. In the Catholic Church, there's an expression. I don't know if the rabbis have anything exactly parallel, but it seems awfully close. For what it's worth, to avoid occasions of sin, and then you can build your fences around that. I guess I don't know. I guess that is very much like that concern. I'm not sure that I'd like to build a life out of building fences to avoid occasions of sin. Don't go to the movies because you might the wrong impulses might be encouraged and so on. But that's part of it. It can lead to a certain kind of life, or that you might or might not approve of, but it can keep you away from at least performing some of the heavier sins.
I mean, that's like half of kashrut law is, I mean, it's not necessarily, I mean, it might have, this is the one rule, but then, they build a fence around, more of the law to really make sure that you don't break, kashrut or something.
I think Charles's example was really good about the stop sign. If you get away with something, it's very easy then to just do it again. So fleeing from it would be, hey, think before you make another mistake like that. So next time the cop's gonna catch you.
Something else, David.
All right, so when it says be quick in performing a commandment, minor or major, how is that relevant to our lives today?
I think it's relevant because we can get quite easily lost in the details and sort of lose our intentionality in performing not just minor and also major mitzvot, but also just any kind of daily deed. So it kind of applies to both observance of Torah laws, but also just our daily actions. We can kind of forget the point of why we're doing it, certain things. It can kind of lead us astray further and may even lead us to not actually do what we're trying to do to begin with. So that's sort of how it retains some importance and relevancy in both spheres, the observance of Torah and sort of mundane daily actions.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me, the more I think about something, the less I'm likely to do it. Like, for example, excuse me, Shabbos, I was going to go to shul. I got something came up that I just procrastinated, didn't go, that I didn't feel like Zooming. So I just did the heck with it.
Yeah. So what sounds like what you're saying, Paul, is sometimes if it's like the phrase, he who hesitates is lost. If you see the opportunity, just go for it.
It's like, exactly. It's happened far too many times.
And then you fall into another transgression, Paul.
Exactly. That's perfect. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, so then I sat down tried to daven, fell asleep, and said, "Oh,
Oh, boy. But you were great on Friday night helping Sarah.
it was
with
beautiful. It was
Melanie. Yeah,
beautiful."
you were great. So that was a major commandment you did.
So then thinking about this idea of minor commandments and major commandments, leaving aside the question of what is exactly a minor commandment in the Torah, this idea of be quick in performing a minor something, as in the case of a major something, how is that relevant to our lives?
A stitch in time saves 9.
Go on.
Well, just like if you're doing something small,
Mm-hmm.
you may accidentally do something big. So it's like you're sewing a minor rip, big deal. You can go with a little hole, but sooner or later it's going to get into a big hole. Same thing, just like for me, for example, if I'm on a diet, I'll take a little bit of chocolate, no problem. Then I'll take a little more chocolate. Then it keeps going on and on. The little bit of chocolate is not the sin. It's not a big deal. A lot of it is. Or even the accumulation of just getting used to the idea of not doing the right thing, or getting used to the idea of doing the wrong, whatever. Because it's all of the things we do, we're all really we're all Pavlovian creatures where we always try to do the right thing, and we always try to get a reward, whatever it is. At least I am. It may not be conscious, but I'm always doing it.
Somewhat building off of that also, it also is relevant because the little things in a sense are the foundation for larger things. If we may not have the proper intentionality and execution in minor acts, where is that going to be for more important things, sort of? That kind of a view of it, where you sort of have that which is minor as kind of your foundation for bigger, more important things, I guess.
Yeah.
David, did you have like a list of minor or major mitzvahs?
I don't.
Okay.
I will consult Rav Google and see what I can find on the internet to offer some suggestions as to what might be candidates for a major mitzvah or what would be a minor mitzvah.
Yom Kippur, major. Washing your hands, minor. I don't know.
I think definitely Yom Kippur major, and
I don't know.
I would say that there are those to whom washing their hands are not a minor commandment, but they would still have the issue of, okay, if that's not a minor commandment, what is a minor commandment?
In this day and age, washing your hands is very important.
Well, that's where I was thinking, like, washing your hands is, whenever you say the motzi, like whenever you pray over the wine, those are all like things that you do every time, and that's I think where I think is like the more popular ones, where a lot of people sometimes might skip over, washing your hands blessing, but, minor kind of snowballs into, something major. A stitch in 9 saves, or a stitch in time saves 9, washing your hands might seem like nothing, but, then you have a pandemic on your hand and, it helped you survive. So
you might consider you're doing these minor things, you begin to progress into doing more. And let's say things that are of do I want to use the word greater significance or important or the greater importance? Is you just begin to fall into this pattern? I don't know, because I can speak. Well, my daughter says she wants to become more observant, so she's starting with some small moves and some small measures that she can, and so she's doing it gradually.
I was reading up on somebody who does tefillin, but they don't speak Hebrew, so they can say it. So, and the thing is, they were talking with somebody, and they would do it every day, and they'd say it, but they didn't know what they were doing. But over time, then they finally were learning what they were saying, and so I mean, I thought that was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. David.
I keep coming back to the many management gurus that I read or have read, used to read, where they'd say things like, don't sweat the small stuff and prioritize and, do your to-do list and the most important things at the top and don't worry about the stuff at the bottom. And I think what this is saying is every commandment's important, whether it's small or large, or small or whether it's minor or major. You really should do them all. But if you're doing a minor one, it can lead to another minor one, and then, eventually get to the major ones, or the opposite order. But it's important to do them all.
Torah tends to give different punishments for transgressing a mitzvah or a commandment. Some of them are more severe than others. Would that be a way of distinguishing minor from major?
Seems reasonable.
Related,
Some mitzvahs you lose a life, or for others you only have to pay a few pennies.
related to that, would another way to distinguish be the difference between Torah commandments and rabbinic commandments? Or
Yes.
oh, okay.
So what Gabriel's referring to is there are commandments that the rabbi said, this comes from the Torah. It is a quote, deoraita, using the Aramaic term. And other commandments where the rabbi said, we're telling you that you ought to do this. We acknowledge this isn't exactly in the Torah, but we're going to tell you to do it anyway. And those commandments are derabanan of the rabbis. So both of them are important. And when the rabbis discuss these in the Talmud, they will say that if you've got a quote deoraita commandment that's from the Torah and it is in conflict in a particular situation with a derabanan commandment from the rabbis, then the one from the Torah takes priority. So they're both important, and the one from the Torah takes priority with when you have them in, when you have to prioritize them. So that could be another way of thinking about major commandments as well.
Though, David, aren't there some where they were really rabbinic, but the rabbis like to pretend they were biblical? The one that comes to mind is Shabbos candles, which is why we have the Asher Kitchanu formulation, which in fact isn't in there. So it's like, so maybe that's a middle ground between biblical, rabbinic that the rabbis pretended was biblical. Pretended is maybe not the right word, but formulated as biblical and rabbinic.
Yes. So what Tybal is referring to is in the blessing for Shabbat candles, which comes from the blessing for Hanukkah candles. In both cases, we have the phrase Asher Kitchanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, where we say that God made us holy with God's commandments and commanded us to, in this case, light the Hanukkah candles or the Shabbat candles. God did not command us directly to light the Hanukkah candles in the same way that God commanded us to dwell in a sukkah, because Hanukkah is not in the Torah. Hanukkah happens after the Torah is over. And yet the rabbis say that they can claim divine backing for this, and that this is a commandment from God based off of their interpretation of a verse from Deuteronomy, possibly chapter 17, or possibly in Parshat Shoftim, where the verse says you should listen to them and do what they say. In the context of the verse, it appears to be talking about the magistrates, and the rabbis say, well, we're going to take this verse and we're going to apply it to us, and so now you should listen to us and do what we say.
The Torah says that God commands us to observe the Sabbath. So by having a specific act of lighting the candles at a certain time, we know when Shabbat starts. So we know when to start observing it.
That's true. The Torah does say keep Shabbat, and the rabbis, I believe as far back as the Mishnah, go so acknowledge that the rules of Shabbat that they have come up with are a mountain hanging by a thread from the text of the Torah. That's their phrasing. So they recognize that they've expanded the rules greatly, but I would agree with you, Herb, that lighting Shabbat candles is more easily grounded in the Torah than lighting Hanukkah candles. That's a good point.
Very few lawyers have been as candid, I think, as the rabbis in the example you just gave about the arguments they made. I'm very impressed with that.
Yes. Other thoughts about this text?
It's just a few words, but when you look at each one, it's very important because these are things we forget about to do good, which goes along with what you asked us to talk about in the very beginning.
So what would Ben Azai's answer be to the question of why should you be good?
Leads to good.
Because good begets good.
It's good habits.
I think he assumes, at least for the purpose of these statements, that the mitzvot are obligatory. So he takes that as a given. So you're good, if that defines good, because you've been told to be good. if you accept the mitzvot as binding on you. And if you don't, you have a different perspective. That's really, I don't know what was in his mind. But then once you have that, then you can build these ideas about virtue and about how good leads to more and bad the same in a way. But he's starting somewhere. He never makes the argument, except that it says at the beginning, I guess, of each chapter, the thing about that all came from the what does it say in each chapter? It all comes from the start. I'm sorry. It's at the beginning. It's the beginning of Pirkei Avot. I'm thinking of the chain of authority.
Yeah.
I guess we define doing the mitzvot as being good. But is there really any absolute of what good is? We have another set of rules which would be considered good, much different from the ones that we have here.
Namely?
Oh, I don't have an answer to that one yet. I haven't sat down and tried to come up with one, but certainly different cultures have come up with what they call rules that differ, at least in part, from these 617 or 613. So is there an absolute good?
I would say, if you haven't watched the TV show The Good Place, it kind of talks on something like this. It's just a fun sitcom, but like, I mean, it's a fun little thing that talks about absolute good. But, and I also know, looking at time, where this is a bad time to mention this, but I have a counterpoint to good is rewarded with good, basically, is the story of Job. But so.
All right, I'll address that in the follow-up.
Thank you.
Okay.